Hello ladies and gentlemen, thank you immensely for joining us on this news bulletin over For You Media Africa. We debut this segment, of course, to talk Sahel and insecurity in Africa, where French President Emmanuel Macron officially announced during his visit to Toulon the end of the back-end military operation in the Sahel region after 9 years of operation. The French president also announced an adaptation of French bases in Africa. The rest of the story is with you, Futso.
Deployed in the Sahel, the Barkhane military operation aimed to fight against armed jihadist groups throughout the region. After 9 years spent in the Sahel, criticism is expressed by the population for the lack of protection of individuals. Also, from the point of view of the populations, the presence of Operation Barkhane, instead of stopping, has rather multiplied the terrorist attack. On June 13, 2022, under pressure from the military in power, headed by the Colonel Assimi Goïta, the French withdrew from the Menaka base. On the last day of their departure, Malian Foreign Minister Abdoulaye Diop sent a letter to the United Nations Security Council, accusing France of supplying arms and logistics with intelligence to the terrorist group. He asked for an emergency meeting and threatened to use force in the event of an incursion of French troops on Malian soil. On November 9, 2022, the President of the French Republic, Emmanuel Macron, during his speech delivered in Toulon, officially announced the end of Operation Barkhane in the Sahel. He also announced a significant adaptation of French bases in Africa. According to Emmanuel Macron, the principle is to reduce the exposure and visibility of military forces in Africa and focus on cooperation and support mainly in terms of equipment, training, intelligence and operational partnership.
We move away from insecurity now to talk UK-Nigerian relations, where King Charles welcomed the President of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, to Birmingham Palace on Wednesday afternoon. President Muhammadu Buhari told the media after the meeting that they had discussed mainly economic issues. Mr. Buhari said King Charles spoke very well of Nigeria, the West African nation, and was interested very much in the country. The Nigerian leader added that the meeting was initially scheduled to take place in Rwandan capital Kigali during the Commonwealth Heads of State meeting that took place in June, but it was postponed. President Buhari has been in London since last week for what his office has called a routine medical checkup. He is also expected back home next week. King Charles will later this month host the first state visit of his reign when he welcomes the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa to the Birmingham Palace. The visit will take place from the 22nd to the 24th of November 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, we now talk the African continent, where Algeria has announced that it has officially submitted its application to join BRICS, a group of states bringing together Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. A request for membership which comes in an international context marked by the war in Ukraine. The rest of the story is with you, Jay Futso.
It is now official. Algeria has joined the BRICS groups. The announcement is from Leila Zerouki, in charge of major international partnerships at the Algerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who made it known on November 7, 2022. This Algerian request to integrate the BRICS comes in an international context marked by the war in Ukraine and the desire of China and Russia to create a counterweight to what they consider to be Western hegemony. The 5 BRICS countries intend to strengthen their weight and better advance their point of view in international economic negotiations, in particular at the G20, IMF and WTO. During the last BRICS summit in June 2022 in China, the decision to open up memberships to other countries has been taken, and countries such as Iran, Saudi Arabia or Algeria could therefore apply. Algeria has strong diplomatic and economic relations with the countries of this group. China and Russia have already declared support for its request. South Africa is also a traditional ally of Algiers, to main one on the African continent. The change at the head of power in Brazil and the return of President Lula da Silva could also play in favor of its candidacy, All these elements together should consolidate the Algerian position.
Let's now talk migration between the East African country of Kenya and South Africa in the southern part of the continent, where the presidents of South Africa and Kenya said on Wednesday they have resolved a long-standing visa dispute and Kenyans will be able to visit South Africa's visa-free for up to 90 days in a calendar year. South Africans can already get free visas upon arrival in the East African country of Kenya, while Kenyans were charged and required to provide proof of sufficient funds and return flight tickets. The new government or new agreement is set to take effect on January 1st, 2023. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa was in Kenya on his first official visit to the country. He and Kenyan President or newly elected President William Ruto praised the Ethiopian peace agreement signed last week in South Africa and brokered by the African Union. They appealed to the parties to ensure full implementation of the agreement to reach a lasting political settlement. We move away from the migration ties between Kenya and South Africa to now talk COP27, which is ongoing in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Just to recall that Namibia said at the end of the COP summit on Tuesday, of course, that it had secured over 540 million euros, approximately $544 million in climate finance from the Dutch government and the European Investment Bank. You can listen to the details of the story. Namibia revealed at the COP27 summit taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, on Tuesday that it had secured over 540 million euros, approximately $544 million, in climate finance from the Dutch government and the European Investment Bank. With the dream of positioning itself as a renewable energy hub in Africa, Namibia, one of the world's sunniest and least densely populated countries, intends to produce green hydrogen. The Dutch grant is from infrastructure funding vehicle Invest International, while the facility from the European Investment Bank is to build green hydrogen and renewable energy projects in the Southern African country. President Haig Gingop highlighted the funds represented the largest amount of concessionary finance to combat the effects of global warming that his country has incurred to date. To crown it all, Namibia signed the Memorandum of Understanding with the European Union on Tuesday on renewable hydrogen and rare raw materials. In May, the European Union's energy strategy set a goal of importing at least 10 million tons of green hydrogen by 2030, with another 10 million tons to be produced within the bloc. We are still talking climate change. To wrap up this edition of your news bulletin, ladies and gentlemen, we'll now tell you that close to 25 countries attending the COP27 climate summit that debuted on Monday in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, have launched a group to hold each other accountable for a pledge to end deforestation by 2030, announcing billions of dollars in additional financing for their efforts. The details of the stories in the following reports. At the first meeting of the Forest and Climate Leaders Partnership, close to 25 countries attending the COP27 climate conference that debuted on Monday in Egypt have launched a group to hold each other accountable for a pledge to end deforestation by 2030, announcing billions of dollars in additional financing for the effort. The Leaders Partnership, chaired by the United States and Ghana, takes place a year after more than 140 leaders promised at COP26 to end deforestation by the end of the decade. According to records, the progress has been patchy since the last meeting, with only a few countries worldwide instituting more aggressive policies on deforestation and financing. A new group, which includes Japan, Pakistan, the United Kingdom and others, accounts for roughly 35% of the world's forests and aims to meet twice a year to track the progress. COP26 President Alok Sharma said in a statement, I quote, "This partnership is a critical next step to collectively deliver on this promise and help keep the goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius alive." Ladies and gentlemen, that report on deforestation, COP27, the United Nations Climate Change Summit that is ongoing in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, puts a stop to this news bulletin over for you, Media Africa. I have been Jix Nabsi for presentation. Programs continue. Do have a great day.